You're listening to the Mind Your Business podcast, episode number 24. Today, we're talking all about how to use intuition in business. So, stay tuned. Hi, I'm James Wedmore, and I've built a 7-figure internet business that offers the financial freedom to do what I want, when I want. And I'm the first to say that hard work and hustle are not essential ingredients for your success. So, how do you build a thriving business from the inside out? This is the Mind Your Business podcast, featuring myself and co-host Phoebe Mroczek. So this is a big week for us. Phoebe and I have made the decision to actually go to 2 episodes per week, which I'm really excited about. So this should be the first week that you have 2 episodes. We've been just so happy and having a great time running this podcast. And so let's double it up was our initial thought. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to have our main 45-minute to an hour content focused episode on either a Monday or a Tuesday. This week, I think it's coming out on a Tuesday. We're scrambling to get everything situated. And then on our Thursday edition, we're going to do a shorter segment, which is going to be a listener question of the week. And so a lot of you have already submitted questions. We have a link over at mindyourbusinesspodcast.com where you can submit a question. If you can't find where to submit it, just leave a comment on one of our latest episodes and we'll make sure to do that. I've also had people private messaging me on Facebook. We're like, oh, that's a great question. So we're really excited to do that. Those are going to be shorter segments. So, here we are. We're about to start our 24th episode of the podcast. We launched this in the middle of January. I'm loving it. If you're listening, it means there's something about it that you're still enjoying. So I thank you for listening on behalf of Phoebe and I. I truly thank you and I acknowledge you for listening and hanging out with us for a couple of reasons. First off, I'm pretty weird. I'm a little out there. Most people in business aren't going to be talking about some of the things that we're talking about, but a lot of people are actually telling me to talk about more of it. Take us deeper down the woo-woo rabbit hole. I will. It's coming. But I do like to balance it and ground it with, best business practices and action-oriented. Really, this is a blend and the dance of the left brain and the right brain, of spirituality and systems and, sales and attraction and putting all of it together. And, the bottom line is this is stuff that I've been using in my business. And now it's become very second nature. It's what we would call a unconscious competence level for me, which I love. Today I'm actually 7 days away from marrying my soulmate and my business partner. And, I've spent the last couple of days just hanging out, meditating and surfing and going for walks. And this is a business I've created. And a week before that, I was hosting our mastermind with Phoebe out here in Laguna Beach. And we're like, man, it doesn't get any better than this. And so, I may take you down the rabbit hole a bit. It might get a little weird at times. It's a little too much. And, I understand that. That's okay. I just ask, I invite you to keep an open mind. This is all stuff that, at the end of the day, I'm seeing results I'm happy with. I'm no expert. I'm no guru in any of this. And please don't think that I am. I just, I absorb so much and I keep learning. I mean, my shelves are overflowing with books that blend from all kinds of things in the realm of spirituality and healing and metaphysics to practical business books and systems. I mean, today, when I wasn't meditating, I was sitting inside Infusionsoft's campaign builder, building out an automated funnel, So for me, I love the blend. So I do want to encourage you to keep that open mind. And today's episode is going to be no different because we're talking about something that I've learned to develop, that being very left-brained. This was a challenge for me, but today I use it all the time, and that's intuition. We have a lot to go over with that one, so I'm really excited. Now, before we jump into it, I want to share that if you haven't listened to last week's episode number 23. That's actually hands down my favorite episode of the podcast that we've done. We brought on now a good buddy of mine, Chris Vondermaven, to talk all about meditation. So whether you already do meditate or you've written it off or you've tried it and failed, I want to invite everyone to listen to that episode for 2 reasons. First off, I truly believe it is the pinnacle of the type of content, the quality of content that we really want to create here on on the show. And second of all, I just think that Chris had some beautiful things to share that had nothing to do with meditation, but really about how to live life and how to experience life and how to be present and how to deal with, as we call the monkey mind, that voice in our head that can dictate our emotions and our thoughts and our focus, and how to identify what it is and how to calm it down. So I absolutely love that episode, and I really encourage you guys to go listen to that one. But without further ado, I want to go ahead and start this week's episode for you that's all about how to use intuition for making decisions in your business. Let's have a listen. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the call. Thank you for joining us. I'm James Wedmore.
I'm Phoebe Mroczek.
Today, in this very special episode, well, they're all special episodes, aren't they? We're going to be talking about intuition and business. So we have a lot to go over. This is a big, long episode. We're going to talk about what is intuition. Is it just some hocus pocus, like crystal ball reading, or is this really a sixth sense that we can develop? And then, of course, if that is possible, what are the steps to developing intuition in business?
So I am really excited about this episode because this is something that I'm actually interested to hear more about, how you personally, James, how you use intuition in business, and things that I can't quite distinguish if it's just a hunch or a little bit more than a hunch. And so I'm excited to learn a bit more in this
We'll definitely talk about that. We'll talk about, is it really intuition? Am I really getting a premonition about what's the right decision for me to make in my business? Or is it fear? Or is it ego? Or is it just crazy kooky thoughts that pop into our brains that are influenced by our subconscious mind from watching House of Cards last night? Who knows? We'll discuss all of that. But I want to start out with some really cool studies that we stumbled upon. There was a study done by, oh boy, and I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing their name, Jagdish Parekh, a Harvard researcher who studied over 13,000 business executives, and over 80% of these executives credited their success to relying on their intuition. Aha! So people are using it, right? And then there was some research conducted by a woman by the name of Ashley Field. She's a senior advisor to Shell Oil, and she concluded that among Fortune 500 companies, intuitive information processing strategies are most often found at the highest levels of an organization. So here are modern day corporations, executives in Fortune 500 companies talking about the power of intuition. However, we can find evidence of powerful, influential thought leaders using intuition for hundreds of years before that. For example, Albert Einstein was said to have made some of his biggest discoveries while he was daydreaming. In fact, a quote by Albert Einstein goes a little something like this: "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." And then there's Nikola Tesla. He's my personal favorite hero. I love Nikola Tesla. And if you learn a little bit about his story, you'll know that some of his best inventions. I mean, it's so sad when you learn the history of Nikola Tesla because he was just an absolute genius and he brought so many amazing gifts to the world and, was kind of overshadowed by other people. But he would talk about how his greatest inventions came as a flash of insight, just visions that would pop into his brain for the solution to a problem he was working out. And Nikola was quoted as saying, "Instinct is something which transcends knowledge." Instinct is something which transcends knowledge. We have undoubtedly certain finer fibers that enable us to perceive truths when logical deduction or any other willful effort of the brain is futile. In fact, we also found a really cool interview, a video on YouTube done by Duke University, an interview of the Apple CEO, Tim Cook, talking about his decision to go to work for Apple. How he tried using his logical pros and cons, pluses and minuses, deductive reasoning skills to justify his reason to jump ship and move to Apple. And he couldn't do it. However, in his heart and in his gut, he knew it was a yes. He knew it was the right decision to make. Everything on paper and everyone around him said, "You're crazy. This is nuts. Don't do it." And, looking back in hindsight, it was obviously the right decision to make. And I think that's really a lot of what intuition is. And we'll be talking about that today, is it's making a decision that is not logical. And that's kind of the point. I think intuition is really like a feeling thing. It's much more about feeling the answer than thinking the answer. We want to get you to flex that muscle here. And yes, I have used intuition today. In fact, we're running a beta course right now for one of my products, and I'm basically teaching students how I've built my business. And I kind of had to confess to them, I was like, it's actually really hard to teach some of this stuff to you, because I realize that 90% of the decisions that I'm making in my business are based off of intuition today. And we will have some examples for you. But I want to kind of give some definitions, right? So let's start to look at what is intuition first. Then we'll give some examples and we'll show you how to do that. Does that sound good?
That sounds perfect.
So the word intuition comes from the Latin word intuere, which means look within. And I think that's really what we want to get you to start doing. And I think another fascinating thing that we can pull into this is a term that Carl Jung coined called the collective unconsciousness, which is this concept that talks about that there is this unconscious universal mind that is shared among beings of the same species, that we can actually each individually tap into a greater source of knowledge or a larger mind. And let's see, the official Webster dictionary definition defines intuition as the power or facility of attaining direct knowledge without rational thought. And I think that's what the challenge is here, is that we are mostly very rational creatures. And so we try to make decisions that are logical. And I actually today really, really enjoy making decisions that the people around me call me crazy. In fact, that's kind of a litmus test that I have today. If my fiance Chelsea doesn't call me crazy or nuts at least once a week, maybe I'm not following my intuition enough. And I know that sounds crazy in and of itself, but I try to use as much of my intuition as much as I can in business. So yeah, we'll give you some examples of that in a moment.
Well, James, let me ask you something. So when you're saying that you're making your decisions based on intuition, let's say you make a decision that does not have a favorable outcome.
Yeah.
And then if it had, you would have said, oh, that was intuition. That was a great decision because of my intuition. But if you make a decision that maybe doesn't go so well, would you still have that same confidence saying, well, that was intuition, and you kind of mold it into what lesson would I be learning from that and kind of turn it into a positive?
Well, here's a very important thing to keep in mind. First of all, there is no positive or negative. There is no right or wrong, okay? That there is only that which we call or decide or choose or label or see as right or see as wrong. And, this transcends what we're talking about with intuition. But we have to be mindful too that sometimes a lot of times we can't see the forest through our own trees, that we can't see the bigger picture. And I have so many times where the things that I struggled in, the things that were on a breakdown for me at that time, were some of the greatest gifts, lessons, and experiences that I could have ever had, right? And there's the ancient fable of the man who didn't want it was a man in China, who didn't want his son to go to war. And, he would pray and pray that he didn't want the army to come and take his son. And he's praying every day about this. And then all of a sudden, his son falls off his horse and breaks his leg. And he thinks I'm cursed. God isn't answering my prayers. Sure enough, the next day, the army comes to take all the young, strong men in the village, and they leave the boy alone because he has the broken leg. Whether that's a true story or not, I could never tell you, but it's a great example of being able to see and be open to a bigger picture. So I want to put that out there first. The second thing is that I have had experiences, and I'll share one in a moment, where I felt a gut instinct. I felt something that was an intuitive knowing that was telling me to basically go left, and I went right. It yielded a result that I was not happy with. And I was really bummed out about this. And I was like, man, I should have listened to my gut. It's like I knew in every cell in my body that I shouldn't have done this. And what it was just a promotion I did and the way I did it. And it just didn't turn out the way that I was happy. It wasn't bad. It wasn't wrong. It wasn't like the end of the world. It was just like, I knew I shouldn't have done this. And I remember a friend consulting me on this, and they said, well, but your gut told you not to. Yeah, I know. Like, well, that just shows like your intuitive muscle is really strong. And a lot of what we want to talk about here is if you're listening to this because you want to develop your intuitive muscle, because that's how we want to look at it, the quickest and easiest way to do that is to start listening and trusting it. And so even though I didn't listen to it, I acknowledged that, okay, there was something telling me, don't do this. I chose in the moment to not listen to it. I began to recognize that it was there and it was guiding me. So I don't know if that answers anything for you there, Phoebe.
Definitely. I think it's a lot about reframing what's actually happening to you. And so I'm sure all of our listeners, I know I certainly have had situations where they did not seem that favorable, but where, I had a promotion that I should not have done, or I took on a client that I had a bad feeling about, and it kind of went in the direction that I thought. And as opposed to being like, oh God, that sucks. It was like, oh, actually, I kind of knew that was going to happen. In the moment, it is not a great experience. But when you look back on it, obviously it teaches you a lesson.
Yeah. And I don't know if this was part of your question, but I have not had an experience yet where I had a strong intuitive hit and it led me down the wrong path.
Yeah. If I have had one, I can't remember it.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm definitely otherwise like we wouldn't have made this episode, right? So what I want to do before we go any deeper is I feel like we have to start with a premise that you have to swallow first. For our skeptics on the call, which is totally fine. We totally welcome that. We're talking about some like pretty far out there stuff. But again, we backed it up with some studies that here are some successful people, from like the CEO to Apple to high level executives in Fortune 500 companies that are saying, yeah, we use intuition on a daily basis. And I think everybody's using intuition, but sometimes they just don't call it that. Like sometimes they're like, man, that person just rubbed me the wrong way. I got a bad vibe from that person, or I don't know, I'm going to go with my gut on this and say no. Okay. These are all intuition. And it's like, we're trying to not call it intuition and say like, well, it's years of experience. It's like, yes, but it's also like, it's a feeling that's not based on all the logic and numbers that could be written down and put on paper. Right. But I think what will help here, or maybe not, is that where I come from a belief standpoint to really make this work is there's a quote by Rumi that says, I love this quote. It says, it's rigged, everything in your favor. And so if we come from a place where we believe that the universe or God or whatever you want to call it is like your number one fan, the universe or God has your back and everything is rigged in your favor to facilitate the best journey and experience of life possible, then listening to this intuition is like listening to the voice that's trying to guide you down the best possible path for your life. Now, there are going to be people that have their own, beliefs and, religious standpoints that say, no, life is meant to be a struggle. It's meant to be difficult. We're not meant to be deserving and all these type of things. That's fine. We each got our own beliefs and values and stuff. That doesn't serve me. So I like to come from a place that it is all rigged in our favor. And I invite you to do the same. Because if we come from that place, I get more excited about being guided by intuition. Abraham Hicks talks about the path of least resistance and going down the flow and being guided that way. And I believe that intuition is that voice that's gently putting you onto that path of least resistance. And so we just have to learn to listen to it. And it is hard because it takes trust. One of my favorite Zen quotes is leap and the net will appear. Leap and the net will appear is really what it feels like to trust your intuition and go forth and do. And so, we have so many examples of questions I have asked or insights that I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. And that works out so much better than things that we've spent months planning and strategizing and trying to make it perfect and prepare for any other problems. And then some of the things that are just like inspired can yield so much greater results. And we'll go into some more specifics in a moment.
So let me ask you this. Is this whole intuition thing, and this is obviously a process that I'm trying to wrap my brain around it too, because I find that I think I'm fairly intuitive, and I think that, all my gut instincts have been or have served me in a positive way. But is this something that we're born with? Is this something that over time we kind of fine tune that little voice? Like, what are your opinions on that?
That's a really good question, and I can't possibly know that for sure, right? I can only give my theory and my guesses on that. I look at my own life, and I look at where I started as being a very left brain, very logical person, and how I've really opened myself up to this. However, I also look at some of the things I did as a child. And what's so funny is the things I did when I was young, when I was playing, when I was having fun, what I wanted to do with my day are the things that I practically do today, 20, 30 years later, 25 years later, right? I was playing business when I was a kid. I'm not joking. I would set up shop in my bedroom and had a stand, and I would try and sell stuff to my parents as they walk by the hallway. I was hired to do gardening by one of my neighbors while they were out of town, and I would pluck all the fruit, like the avocados and the lemons, and I'd go sell it to all the other neighbors. I mean, that's when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. I mean, a million entrepreneur things. So then there was no logic. There was no strategy. It was that was just how I spent my day. That was just what I wanted to do. So in that sense, I feel like there is always something that's kind of our innate being that calls us forth to do what makes us happy, what fulfills us, what lights us up, what excites us. And we kind of get trained to not listen to that. And then the rest of your life is bringing that back. How many books and stories and quotes does it talk about the innocence of a child, or the wisdom that children have, or do what you did as a child. And so I do feel it gets kind of trained out of us. And then we spend the rest of our life kind of trying to trust it again. Kind of gets snuffed out from our education, from jobs and stuff like that. But for someone like me, how much I use it on a day-to-day basis is scary. It really is to think about it. But I definitely did not have that. I did not feel like I had that 10 years ago, even 7 or 8 years ago. And so I've definitely developed it as a muscle. And so I do believe at one level, people all have this, and they really we need to flex it. And we'll talk about how to flex it. Now, of course, there are people out there that are born with extraordinary gifts, just like there are people born as extraordinary athletes. Whether they practice or not, they're still 10 times better than the average person, right? And then they start practicing and they become the best in the world. So I think it's just like that.
When you're talking about all the actions that you took as a kid, I had very similar things. I had a rock stand, a stationary stand, lemonade stand, all that stuff. But where is that inspiration and inspired action? Where do inspired action and intuition kind of fit into place?
I feel it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really do. I think all these words start with in, and it really is about going within. And, we do an episode talking about quieting the mind so that you can go within. Okay. So Abraham Hicks, who we reference a lot on here because I listen to their stuff so much. They have this analogy of a cork floating on the top of the water. And so when you look at the cork, if you take a cork from a wine bottle, you dropped it in the ocean, it would float. We all know that. And that becomes the natural tendency of the cork, is to float. And then she uses this as an analogy. And she said, if you were to grab the cork and pull it under the water, you would be holding the cork below the surface down at the depths of the ocean. And she basically says, this is what we do with ourselves, with our minds, through that negative self-talk, through negative emotions, through what we focus on negatively. We pull ourselves down. We pull ourselves into a lower vibration, out of that frequency of gratitude, happiness, joy, bliss, passion, and excitement. And we hold ourselves down there. We pinch ourselves off to inspiration, to insight, to inspired action. And what they propose, the Abraham Hicks crew, is that it is our natural tendency to be up there floating at the top. It's our natural tendency to be full of joy and passion and gratitude. And if we simply let go of focusing on all that negative stuff, we can begin to raise our vibrations and go into more of a place of inspired action, which is why today, my priorities is having fun. It's how can I go to the beach every day, go surfing, do the things that I enjoy doing. I think that's a huge message of what we're trying to share here, is that, you can tap into that stuff when you're doing the things that make you feel alive, when you get to have fun. I mean, I don't know how many times, like when I'm traveling, when I'm hanging out with friends, when I'm doing something that's not working, we have our greatest ideas and insights. And it's all the same thing to me. It's intuition, it's inspired action, it's something. It's just inspiration, right? I think it's all the same. It's when we let go of the crap that brings us down, that makes us feel negative or whatever, we can tap into something greater than us, you know? And Abraham, they talk about this, I forget the exact term they use, but like this greater self. And that really that's the spirit version of you that is complete, perfect, whole, that is calling you to that. And that, you know, when we can just let go, stop being negative or upset or in a breakdown or complaining or whatever, we get access to that like higher self version of us. Does that make sense?
It does. Definitely. I remember something that you said to me early on, right when I had started working for you. And you had said, if you feel stressed, worried, or scared, I'm not doing my job. And I just remember thinking, that's something that I would love to impart on my friends, family, because I always do want to be having fun and to lead with the ease and effortlessness of business, you know, when it comes to a business setting or in my family. Like, I want to make sure that it is very light and that way we can all kind of have our best ideas or, you know, just kind of have fun and keep it light as opposed to just so serious all the time. And I think just from the feedback that we've received from the podcast itself, I think people are up for that. You know, that's so far away from what people are doing at the moment. So
can I clarify that really quickly? So you said
absolutely.
That I told you that if you're feeling all these yucky things that I'm not doing my job or you're not doing your job.
That you weren't doing your job.
So I would like to change it and make it say that you wouldn't be doing your job because I can't be responsible for how you feel.
Right.
Right. So now in front of everybody, if you're feeling stressed out, overwhelmed, then you're not doing, now you're not doing your job.
Well, all right. Well, there goes the last 2 years of me being like, oh, that was so wise. I love that.
But really, this is, I mean, taking it deeper is like, listen, you're the only one who can be in control of your emotions. And this is another topic for other times. But like, that's the problem with a lot of people is that all of us as people, I mean, it's part of the human condition is that we kind of go around and say, you need to change how you are because it's not making me happy. You got to change what you're doing. You got to stop doing this or start doing that because I'm not happy. I'll be happy once you do that. And, you know, it's really like, okay, you have to find a way to always, that should be your number one job is to be happy no matter what Abraham calls unconditional love with everything in your life.
Yeah, I think the way I took it was that you're leading by example. And so if you're stressed and you aren't having, you know, you're not having fun and enjoying the path, the process of what you're doing in your own business, how can you lead, you know, everyone else on the team if you're not walking the walk as well?
Yeah, no, and I totally get that. So I don't want us to get too far off of this, you know, intuition, but that really ties into some of the steps we want to teach. So again, what exactly is intuition? You know, I think another thing is it's about being able to see ahead. To see what isn't unseen at the moment, to see the unseen, to see the future in a way. We're not talking about like developing like full on psychic abilities, like, oh, you will live in a mansion with 2 kids and a dog, but to be able to see the unseen. And that's really what entrepreneurship is anyways, you know? So like, I think we have to develop this. I'm actually looking at, we have a giant vision board in my office, and there was actually something I just popped into my eye line that says your intuition has something to tell you, which is another way of looking at it, you know, is that it's always there, ready to talk to you, ready to give you a sign, ready to share valuable knowledge that's for your highest good. And it's really about having a conscious intention to listen to it. Okay, so again, I also said this too, it's a feeling energy much more than a thinking energy. So when people ask questions like, well, what do you think about this, Phoebe? Or what are your thoughts on that? We want to see if we can answer that question, but also ask the question, how do I feel about this? How does this make me feel? And so speaking of that, we're going to talk about the 4 like types of intuition. There are more, but these are the 4 ways in which people receive psychic or intuitive messages. Okay. So there's clairsentient, clairvoyant, claircognizant, and clairaudience. So these are basically how we can receive this 6th sense through our different modalities. So what's clairsentient?
So that is what I have been told that I am. And as I was reading more about it, I'm like, yes, this is. So it's basically your ability to feel and to experience different energy. Mm-hmm. So for example, if I am sitting somewhere and somebody walks in the room, the hair on my arms will stand up. So that kind of thing, that ability to feel. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. Clairvoyance is what we've usually heard is like the most common term. Most people are familiar with that. And, voyant, it's visual. So having if people get a picture in their mind, if they can see something, I don't think it's necessarily in 3-dimensional reality. It's more like a visualization in their head. Like they had a flash of something. Like Nikola Tesla will literally talk about how he'd be lying down in a park and he'd get a flash of his invention, already done before he'd ever made it. That would be clairvoyant. There's clairaudience, which is actually hearing something, whether it's a voice answering you in your head. And I don't think, again, it's not how you listen to this podcast, you hear our voices, but hearing a voice in your head almost and listening to that voice. And then this is the one that I feel I resonate most with, and that is claircognizant. And this is to me, this is all I can speak to because this is the only experience I have, is that things to me just are kind of a knowing that you don't know how they got there. And you don't remember when you didn't know them. And so a great example of how I interpret this is why is the sky blue? Didn't we all ask that question at one point as a kid? Did you ever ask that, Phoebe?
Yeah, of course.
So who knows when we found out? There's a couple answers. People say, oh, because of the ocean or because of some, hue of reflectant light from the rainbow or blah, 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 blah. There's a couple of reasons you can Google it. But you don't remember when something that's so common, you don't really remember when you were given that knowledge. It's just something when did you first learn that the sun, there are 365 days in the year, something like that. It's just it just becomes information that you just know. And that's how I usually experience it is it's when I ask, sometimes I don't know the answer. And then if I ask again, it's I've always known the answer. It's very weird.
That's really crazy.
Yeah. It's oh, yes, no, that's what we're doing. We're going to go left, not right. Yes. So
is this easy to compartmentalize? So are you, because I am one, does that mean that I can't be clairaudient, or has my, clairsentience ability been kind of turned up? Do you know the answer to that?
No, I don't. I really don't. You guys we're not experts here, and we are the intuitive, practitioner experts here. I've just been playing around with this for years myself, so I can only share what I know. I have no idea. I feel it's a natural thing. Are you right-handed or left-handed? Oh, you're right-handed. Okay, so that's just what you're dominant on. There's NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, where they talk about the different modalities, people being auditory, visual, kinesthetic, and people are stronger in one of those. And I don't necessarily know if you develop the other, or that's just kind of what you're born with and that's kind of what you use. But I think it's a way for people to see how are they starting to receive information? Because what I would love to get people to do on this call, as crazy as we might sound, is to start pointing out and having awareness of wait a second, maybe this is intuition. Maybe this is this gut thing. And see also, what does it look like when it comes in? Because the more we can recognize it, the more we can listen for it. And the end of the day, the biggest takeaway from this audio, other than, yes, start using intuition more, is that if you want to build that muscle, it really comes down to use. The whole if you don't use it, you lose it thing really, really applies here.
I would encourage people just to Google it and just to start doing some more research, because the more that I have done, I think I had a lady tell me last year what I was, and I did a little bit of research, but now more recently I've done some more, and it is just so interesting what you can find, obviously from reliable sources, but not just the ways that you can enhance it or to kind of, as you're talking about, exercise that muscle, but also things that complications with that. I like to look at that as well. And for example, one thing that it's saying about mine is just that clairsentience and empathy can actually not be that great of a thing, that we pick up a lot of sadness and fear to a point where it's almost paralyzing. And as I was reading this, it was something that, now I'll be a little bit more aware of. And I love reading about this stuff. And so I would just encourage you. And James, have you looked into, obviously you've looked into it, but do you know any complications with yours?
No, but I can totally resonate with, and it's such another topic to talk about, but picking up on other people's stuff, you be around someone and you just gosh, I just kind of feel like I'm having a bad day all of a sudden.
Right.
And if what we're doing on one level is getting people to be more like energetically sensitive, it's can be a gift and a curse. And people will describe, and I've had this experience where you feel what they feel and you can't discern if that's your feelings or theirs. This, again, we're going like pretty down the rabbit hole here, but that can definitely happen. I've felt that. I've felt where I've been with a coaching client, I know they have anxiety, and it's like all of a sudden I have anxiety and I'm having worries about stuff that are totally irrational. Like, why would I worry about this? It's not me. There's stuff that you can do to like clear and cut that and, separate yourself from that. But that happens, especially people that are already like consider themselves an empath and like very sensitive people. They'll talk about they have a gift and it's also a curse. That's definitely bigger than this episode. But bringing it back to how we can use this for ourselves. I want to try out an exercise with you guys if you're willing to do it. And here's how the exercise goes, because what you're seeing as the theme here is that we are getting you to see that if you're using intuition, to acknowledge it and continue to like ask for more. Like, great, what else is out there? So write down a simple list of 5 action items or decisions that you have made recently, simple things in the past week or two that turned out in your favor, and 5 or so that did not. So maybe it was like, I have an example of, someone who, like, this is a great example. Gosh, I have so many of these. Like, they're just like little examples, and when you create this awareness of it, you see it everywhere. But that's the assignment. 5 things, action items, decisions that you've made in the past week or 2 or 3 that turned out in your favor, and 5 that you're not, they weren't a win necessarily. Something that was like, oh man, I screwed up here. I didn't do this, or I wish I would have done that. And I'll show you the next part in a second. But one example is that I found an email from someone, I won't name here, but like, another thought leader in the industry, and they'd asked about connecting and doing an interview with me. And I had totally forgotten about it. And I like randomly stumbled upon this email, was like, oh my gosh, this interview date is like this next week. And I hadn't confirmed it. I hadn't, officially booked it. And I'm like, wow, okay, I knew I need to handle this right now. I need to take care of this right now. And I'm really glad that I did. Otherwise, I would have totally missed it, And so what you want to do is you want to look for things like that. Did you have to say yes or no to working with somebody? Did you have to make a decision about, maybe hiring a certain type of person? There's a lot of people. We found a lot of really cool articles on the internet about how people use their gut and intuition when in the hiring process. But did you have to hire somebody recently? Did you have to make a big decision about prices, about your offer, about what software to use? Is a great example. Like, people ask those questions all the time. And we want to look to see if you can come up with a list of a couple that really worked for you and really didn't. And what we're doing is, if you have those, like if you really want to do this and do it for real, you're going to pause this episode and write a couple down and think really hard. Go back to your to-do list from last week. Like, what did you have to make a decision about that you were kind of stuck in? Okay. And if you do that, what we want to do is we want to see if we can identify if your intuition played a role in that at all. So if it turned out in your favor. So Phoebe, do you have something that you can think of that was like a decision that you had to make in the last couple of weeks?
I was going to use our mastermind as an example. That might be a little bit further off. That's fine. Let's use
that. Yep. So what was the decision?
To actually do it.
Let's actually do it. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about, because I know we both talked about, I was like, a big new thing. It was scary, but okay. So you did it, and it was obviously, this is something that would go in the column of it turned out well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Definitely.
Right. Okay, good. So what we want to ask here is, can you identify where or if intuition played any role there? Like, could you look back in hindsight and play the Sherlock Holmes role to see, was there intuition? Was there a lightness to the feeling? Was there anything that really help this become a yes, or push this in the right direction for you?
Absolutely. So I just remember being in, and the fact that I can actually remember all of the sensations, like I can actually put myself back in your office when we were sitting there at the table. And I remember talking about it being like, we need to either do this or not do this. And I have like goosebumps, and I was like, you know what, let's just do it. And that was like the first thing that I kind of look for. Normally I'll get But just now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, that actually happens all the time to me. And I feel like I don't necessarily ignore it, but I don't really think about it as much. But now that I'm putting myself back in that situation, yeah, I remember having goosebumps. I can like feel the feeling in my gut that
this is exactly what we're talking about, is not only pointing it out, but realizing like, wow, this is happening more than I thought. Right. So do you have either another example of a great decision you made, or one that you're like, I should have gone left instead of right. I should have picked red instead of blue. Do you have something that comes to mind for you?
Yeah. I mean, a specific client for sure.
Oh, great. Okay. So we won't name any names here, but
right.
Tell me, okay, so this is a client. I'm assuming that it didn't turn out well. You don't need to tell all the specifics, but at the end of the day, you're wishing that you didn't work with this client. Is that an accurate assessment? Yes. Okay, great. So take me to, was there a point in time where you had to sit there and make a decision? Like, is there a specific moment of, am I going to take this person on or not? Or is it, I'm going to book this call or not? Like, where was that decision moment?
So the deciding moment was really after we hung up and I had to kind of put together a proposal. And in my head, I remember saying to myself, I really, it's not really about the money. I don't really want to work with this person. The values kind of didn't align, and with his or her values did not align with my own. And so it was in that moment where I was like, do I write the email? Do I write the proposal? I don't think so, but I did anyway.
But you did anyway. So how did it feel? Did you feel it anywhere? Because you're talking about in your head, you're hearing these, there was a lot of these doubt questions like, they don't really align. I don't really feel this connection. Should I do this? Should I do this? Did you feel it anywhere as well?
Yep. So I feel a lot of contraction like in my chest when I like put myself back there, and just in general, when I'm doing something I don't really want to, I don't want to do, I can feel kind of my chest like contracting.
Yep. Got it. And you did it anyways.
Yep.
Why?
I did it because it was more of when I was in that situation, I said to myself, well, it's kind of a favor to somebody. And also I said I would do it. And so let's just do it anyway. And now, as this is coming out, I'm like, this happens to me a lot. And this is when I tend to go against my gut. My intuition is when I'm like, I did say I was going to do it. So let me, be integrous and kind of do what I said I'm going to do, even though it doesn't necessarily feel 100%.
But there was also some guilt there,
Definitely.
where you're like, oh, it was a favor for a favor. And it means you're doing it for somebody else, not for what was in your highest good.
Right.
And that's what brings us back to like, I think at the core, in order to really get excited about, I want to use this intuition thing to guide me, we have to believe that the whole universe or God is conspiring for you to have the greatest life ever. If you're willing to listen and look for signs and look for some sort of guidance and unforeseen path. And that's an example right there. So I think that's awesome. I'm going to give an example. I kind of alluded to it, but it was a promotion that our team did about a year and a half ago. And it was in the calendar. It was mapped out for a while. And as it got closer, my feeling that I have about a project was not in it. It was not there. I can't explain it other than it was like my heart and soul was not in the project and I wasn't as excited about it, but there was greed there. Like, I'm not a greedy person, but when you have a team and expenses and we have expenses, we have payroll, we have things that we got to pay every month, it becomes harder and harder. It really does. It's new challenges that I have to face of like, well, wait a second. Just because James is not feeling something, do I tank an entire promotion that could pay for like the next 2 months of payroll for people? Like those become very difficult decisions to make, right? And so I went with it anyways. And it wasn't bad. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, you've destroyed your business. There's nothing like, I've never had anything like that. And most people have a fear that they're going to, and chances are that will never happen, knock on wood. But it just wasn't nearly what we expected it to be. And at the end of the day, like putting the entire team and the amount of money we put into it was like, this was not worth it. We could have done something so much better. However, and this is actually what brings it full circle, which is really cool. So it was a promotion for somebody else's product. And literally I was going, oh my gosh, I knew we shouldn't have done this. I just kept saying that. I knew shouldn't have done it right as soon as it ended or was coming to the tail end. I was like, man, there's no way we're going to get close to our goal. We shouldn't have done this. I knew it. Why wasn't I listening? to my gut. However, good or bad, remember, I said this at the beginning, we decide good or bad. There was such a beautiful lesson that came out of that, is that I was promoting somebody else's product, and so many people came to me and said, James, we don't want this person's product. We want you to teach this. We want this from you. I must have gotten that from 20 plus emails, like that same exact message. And so even good or bad, I found such a great opportunity within that.
So say that's like written on your piece of paper and you're going through that. What was the experience for you? You just kept saying, because you're one of these like knowing people. Is that accurate? So you just kind of knew in your head, and that's why you're saying, oh, I just know that I shouldn't be doing this. Is that...
Well, I'll give examples of like asking questions and then knowing the answer randomly later. But this was a feeling. This was an emptiness in the pit of my stomach. Like something felt off. Something felt wrong. Something just didn't line up. And I can't explain it any other way than that. But then I just kept saying that. I was like, something's not right with this. Something feels, I can't explain it. And when you're doing this long enough, when you know when something feels right, it's very clear to see when something doesn't feel right. So there's that. Now, I had an example. This actually probably happened a month or two after that, because I remember it was the next promotion we did. This is really cool, is that I was asking a question. We were coming up for a promotion for one of my products. And I asked the question, what would be a new and different way in which I could be promoting this product that would be totally different than I've ever done? What's something new or different to get people on the list and build the buzz around this product? And I just put that out there. Okay, so we'll talk about how to do this as a step-by-step process, but that's what I did. I just kind of put it out there and I walked away. And I got a random phone call from a peer in the industry, and she was telling me what she had just done in her launch that worked really well. And it took about 3 hours after that before I drew the connection. That I was like, oh, wait, I could do that. You know what I mean? Like, oh, there's the answer. Like, so the thing is like, what we want to get to here is like, you know, as we talk about, okay, developing this intuition, listening for this intuition, is not only is this not based on that logical pros and cons list of thinking that you're writing down on a piece of paper, but it's also not going to come in the way that you expect it to. You expect some like godly voice to like part the clouds and come down and say, you will create this product. And like, sure, maybe for somebody that's what's going to happen, but it happens for me, at least, in some of the most odd, casual, nonchalant ways. And it's like, how good are you going to be at listening and pointing it out? So some friend and peer in the industry just randomly called me up and they're sharing their idea that worked. And I'm telling you, that was the best launch we ever did. That was one of the most effective strategies that we ever added. I know people are like, well, tell us the strategy. I'm like, that's another call, because it's a longer thing. But it worked extremely well. And I got coaching clients from that. You know, we did $500,000 on that launch, biggest launch we'd ever done. And people would talk about that months later, like, I loved that you did that. That made such a difference. That one thing right there. And that was just someone, they shared the answer to me. So like, you know, as we go through the steps, part of it is how to listen for the answer, right? And that's a big piece of it. So there's an example. Phoebe, you gave some wonderful examples of where it didn't work out and where it did work out. And I gave one of where it didn't. I'd like to give one example of a decision I made. And it was almost like I didn't ask a question or anything, but we're actually in a launch right now. And I don't know how this happened, but we were sitting there right after a team meeting, and I just got this like hit, and people call it like a hit of inspiration. And it was this idea to add a Facebook group to the launch for everybody who's going through the promotion for free. And as soon as I heard it, I just geeked out about it. Like, it's the most exciting thing to me for this entire launch. I was like, oh my goodness, yes, we have to do this. This is going to be amazing. People are going to love this. And I proposed it to the team in a very like nonchalant, casual way. Like, so here's an idea, guys. It's kind of last minute because the launch starts tomorrow, but I want to propose that we add this Facebook group. Everyone was like, I don't know, James. Like, it's more work. It's more this, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you know, why don't you just trust me on this one? I think it'll be really good. And it has been. Yeah,
I was going to say, because they could have, what if they had been like, no.
Everyone was against it. And I just kind of like, I didn't argue it. I didn't want to fight it. And I was like, listen, why don't you guys think about it yourselves? You have to the end of the day, and let's make a decision. I didn't push it. I didn't want to force it. And they said yes. And everyone has said it's like the smartest decision we made. It's been so amazing. We have almost 1,000 people in there every day. Like, people are loving it. Loving it. And I was like, that's an example of like inspired action, like getting a hit of an idea and then going forth and doing it, knowing, like trusting, yes, this is going to work. There's an example for both. So again, going back to this exercise, you want to write down a few actions or decisions that you have made in the past few weeks. You're going to play Captain Hindsight to your own life. You want decisions that really turned out in your favor and some that probably didn't, like choosing to work with a client or choosing to hire somebody or whatever. And look, can you identify, was there a voice, a feeling, a friend, a sign, something that either guided you towards the right decisions or tried to encourage you away from the wrong ones? And again, at the end of the day, there are no right or wrongs. You know, even when something like turned out poorly, it's such a valuable lesson. Such a valuable lesson. You know, you want to honor and value that. And I know we've had examples of that. When we make a mistake in business, we hire someone wrong, or we make a mistake, we go like, wow, we're never going to do that again. I'm glad that happened now versus in the middle of a launch or something like that. So I want to take you guys through, hopefully you find that valuable, right? Looking at where intuition is coming up in your life. But I want to end you guys with a 6-step process for strengthening the intuition muscle in your business, in your life, really. It's just not just business, it's your life, but we can use it in our business because this is about mind your business, right? So number 1 is a prereq step for everything. And it's always, number 1, get clear on what you want. What is important to you? And this is a hard question for people to answer all the time. What do you want? I don't know. You do know. And if you're saying I don't know, then the trick is blur it. What is the essence of what you want? So Phoebe, I'll take you through this a little bit. What's important to you in your life? What do you want?
Freedom.
And what does freedom look like?
I feel empowered. I feel inspiring.
And when you say those words, what do you see? What do you see in your mind's eye? Like, what do you visualize?
So I kind of feel like expansive. I guess that's like the word that keeps coming to me is it just feels easy. It feels big, like significant. I love that word. And I just feel powerful.
No, this is great. Okay. And this is what you guys want to do. You want to start playing around in that pool of like, what do I want? What's important to me? And it doesn't matter if they're just words or feelings, because this is what should be guiding you, right? Is that if you're following your intuition, the intuition is there to lead you to maintain or keep those emotions. It's not, now this is very important. It's not leading you to those emotions, which most people think, okay? Life is this journey, not the destination.
Can you say that again, just so I don't miss it and so listeners don't miss it?
Yeah, so when I ask you, what do you want? And you say significance and expansiveness and freedom. Your intuition isn't guiding you there. Like if I listen to my intuition, I will one day, hopefully in 5 to 10 years, have those feelings. It's the opposite. It's so the opposite. It's you want to feel that now. And from that place, your intuition guides you forward to the next step of what is the next step of significance and expansiveness and freedom look like for you versus my life sucks. It's not expansive. It's small and compact. There is no freedom. Come on, intuition, give me something good here. Does that make sense? And that's when we talked about the law of attraction in one of our episodes. That was what we're talking about is you got to feel the emotion first. You have to be the outcome. You have to, Abraham Hicks says there's no such thing as a happy ending to an unhappy journey because it's all about the journey and the journey never ends. So step 1 is getting clear about what you want, what's important to you, and let your intuition guide you to maintain that, not to one day reach that. It's not there to get you out of all your problems, but to realize that there are no problems. Does that make sense? And to come from that place now.
Definitely. I worked through Danielle Laporte has a great core desired feelings. And that's her whole book is all about that is like how to get to those core desired feelings that you want to feel and then actually embody that and make decisions from that place. So I am totally on board with that. And
that's exactly it is we're making decisions from that and we're using our intuition to help us make decisions from that. It's like if you were to hire a coach, like let's look at your intuition as a coach. A good coach is always going to say, what do you want? Okay. That's a good coach. Is always going to start there. And you say, well, I want a boyfriend. So let's say it's a relationship coach. Okay, great. What type of, what do you want to feel like when you're in a relationship? Well, I want a guy who lets me have my independence and my freedom. Okay, great. They're not going to set you up with a guy that is a control freak because they know what you want. And that's really what your intuition can do, right? So that's step 1, getting super clear on that. And that's always important. Step number two is what can we do to not just feel that, but remember the analogy of the cork that we're holding down at the floor of the ocean? How do we let go of that cork and do its natural thing, which is float right at the surface? And we do that by meditating, by clearing that our mind or quieting that voice in our mind and taking time to feel present, to not be, burdened by our past and worried about our future, but being present. And can we take time to do that throughout our day? Because what that does, that right there is basically saying, I am listening. I am listening. What do you have to share with me? Because you can't be listening for intuition when you're stuck in a place of stress and anxiety, worried about tomorrow, worrying about time, deadlines, etc. You can only receive intuition from this quieted, present feeling and state of being. Does that make sense?
Definitely. So listen to the meditation episode.
Oh my gosh, it's so good.
That just blew my mind. I'm a totally different person after that.
I know. We'll have to talk about the follow-up of that. Number 3 is, Tony Robbins says the quality of your life is determined by the quality of questions you ask. So ask the right questions. Why am I so stressed? Why does this always happen to me? Are not good questions, right? But, if you need to make a decision about something, so you say, which one of these choices is for my highest and best good? You can also give more of a command of, saying like, I need to make this decision about hiring this person. And you can just kind of say, give me a confidence sign of the correct answer or the answer that's for my highest good by this time tomorrow. I mean, you can get really direct and play around with this. Okay. And that's step 3 is ask the right questions. So most people just don't ask. And
yeah, I think something that I learned, I know that you say it a lot and I've started to now say it is, let's just play in the question. Let's just kind of put it out there. And, I think I talked about in the last episode, but I've started to ask questions before I go to sleep and see if I wake up with, with any kind of answers in the morning. And so now I've started like a dream journal. So as soon as I wake up, the first thing I do is I start writing, and I'm only a couple days into it, but I'm excited to go back and look and see what the question was and if there were any kind of ties to what answer I got while I was dreaming.
I love that. And that's using your intuition as well.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4 comes down to one word, and it's trust. And this is what's going to be the hardest part for people. Leap and the net will appear means take the action and trust. So you have to trust that the answer is coming, and you have to trust when you have the answer. That's another piece of this, is people will feel like they have the answer, but they won't know if did I just kind of make that up in my head? Come on, there wasn't some all-knowing powerful voice that's, the angels didn't come down and sound the trumpets and give me my answer in a song. And it doesn't have to look like that in order for the answer to be received. Okay. And so it's practice the trust. Just practice trusting this. Be detached from when it's going to show up and how it's going to show up, and just trust the receiving. And the more I let go and trust, it's scary, 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 because especially for someone like me who's so logical by nature, we need to have all our ducks in a row. We need to be planned. We need to know the answer. But the people who work on my team, especially Melissa, she knows it was a challenge at first for her to work for us, because I make a lot of decisions like that. Well, when are we going to do these webinars? Or how many webinars are we going to do? Or when's the date of the launch? And I'm like, I don't know yet, but you'll know when I know.
Yeah.
And
I've talked to her several occasions where she's like, oh, I just have no idea when we're doing this. It's just whenever he wants to, or whenever whenever he says. And it's like, well, yeah, but I used to have a problem trusting, but now I think I guess obviously the more you play around with it, the more often that you see your intuition doesn't lead you astray. Now I can I'm like, oh, I think that, all right. I'm just not going to question it anymore, because my brain's like, was it? I don't know. Am I doing this right? Is this happening?
and going to the Melissa example, I would never recommend that you stop planning. We're huge fans of planning, but we create room for, as we talk with Kate Northrup, the margin for magic. I don't know when the webinar is going to be. We're going to do a couple from this date to that date. And as it gets closer, I'll know the answer. We'll go from there. When we do things like follow-up sequences during a launch, I don't have all the emails mapped out perfectly crafted, because I really check in. I'm extremely present during the launch and really check in with like, okay, what does our audience need to hear? The people that really are a right fit for this program, what do they need to hear from me in order for them to sign up and take the right step for them? And that's me kind of checking in with what do I intuitively need to say versus, okay, here is the exact, because that's the thing is everyone is looking for this exact formula and this exact plan on how to do things. Give me the plan. I want the plan. And it's like, no, you have to develop the skill to create your own plan. You have to be able to create your own plan and trust that. So that's number 5. When you trust that the answer is coming and you trust that you've received the answer, take action on the intuition. The more you trust, listen, and take action, the more you develop the muscle. So start small. Don't start with big decisions like, should I marry this person? Or, should I move and buy this house? Like, start with little stuff, like maybe where you're going for dinner or, I play around with it all the time. This is a crazy, crazy story. Just happened 2 weeks ago. I'm randomly running around getting stuff for our wedding 2 weeks ago, and it's Saturday morning in Laguna Beach. The town isn't even up yet, and something just said, go in this store. Like, I just kind of felt like, okay, I'm going to go in here. Like, no reason to, right? It wasn't even on my list of like where I need to get anything. And I went into the store. As soon as I walk in, gentleman goes, hey, are you James? James Wedmore? And I'm like, yes. Hi. He introduces himself, and he is someone that lives in Laguna that runs in similar circles in our industry, and people have been trying to connect me with this guy for like maybe a year. And it just kept coming up and up. Like, have you met so-and-so? Have you met him? Have you met him? Like, wait, you guys, how do you not know each other? You guys live in the same town. It's such a small town. And like a month or two before, I bumped into somebody else that was visiting Laguna down our local Whole Foods. I'm like, hey, what are you doing here? He's like, oh, I'm going to go visit him. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like you're here visiting him. I haven't even met the guy yet in person. And then I just randomly walk into this store. There he was. And we met and like exchanged phone numbers. And we're like, cool, we'll meet up in a little bit and, like go get dinner or something. It's just crazy. Like stuff like that happens all the time. And I think we can invite that to happen more often where there's just like random chance encounters and meetings and stuff. So take action on it. And then step number 6 is to acknowledge it, thank it, and kind of ask for more. If you feel like it's serving you, keep going. So let me repeat these steps for you. Number 1, always get clear on what's important to you. What do you want? What is it? Danielle Laporte's core desired feelings, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. What can you do to get present, to quiet your mind, to meditate, to feel what you want to feel those core desired feelings, and be as present and in the moment as possible? Number 3, make sure to ask the right questions. Ask the question, give a command, of what you want and when you want to know it by. Number 4, you have to trust that it's coming. And if you do feel like you have an answer, trust it. Because listen, when I call it a muscle, it's like you might only be able to lift 5 pounds right now. But you never make fun of somebody who can only lift 5 pounds at the gym because they're at the freaking gym. At least they're doing something. Soon it's going to be 10 pounds, 20, and one day it'll be 100. And then
you'll be like me and it'll be 150.
Hey-o! That's how it's going to feel for some people. It's like, because I remember this, guys. I was there. I hear myself talking about this now. I'm like, I sound like a crazy person. I have to let people know that I really do this and it really works, and I treat this like a scientist. I'm like, okay, let's try this and let's try that. And like, there's proof of it. So it's for a lot of people, if you've never done this before, there's going to be a lot of doubt. Like, is that real? I kind of feel like I just made up an answer in my head. Well, go with it and see what happens. Be your own experimenter, your own scientist in this. But that's number 4, is to trust. Number 5 is to take action from that hit, from that intuition. And number 6 is just acknowledge and thank it. So those are 6 steps to start practicing the intuitive muscle that we all have. Some people feel like they're extremely gifted with intuition. Some people are like, nope, I don't have that. But I do believe we can all develop it. I all believe that there is a path of least resistance, a happy, joyful, cork bobbing on the surface, awesome life that we can be living, not a life of struggle, strife, and letdown. And if we choose to listen, it's going to be counterintuitive. It's going to be against logic. It's not going to make sense. It's going to go against some of the things that you are used to doing. And that's where it gets hard, because you're going to have to trust and do things that might be scary. Leap and net will appear. So this was a rather big episode, and I feel like we've just scratched the topic on something I would love to passionately share more about, and it's using intuition in business, in decision-making, in hiring, and really just in everyday life. And I hope people have found this value. I sometimes worry that people just think I'm a total crazy person, but I secretly know that more people than you think are using intuition in some way. They're trusting their gut. And I want to encourage you to do that, to practice it, to be your own scientist. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. If you have, and you haven't left a review yet for us, head on over to iTunes. The quickest link to do that is jameswedmore.com/iTunes. And please leave us a review there. Phoebe and I check every single review, and most of them are nice and awesome. So when they are nice, it really makes our day. So thank you so much. The feedback, the comments have just been extraordinary, and we're so excited to come out with more episodes like this one.
And if you have any questions for us, we are going to start doing a bigger segment on audience questions. So you can find the link in the show notes, or you can go over to mindyourbusinesspodcast.com, and there will be a link there where it will bring you to a survey. Fill it out and let us know what your biggest questions are, and maybe we'll feature you on the podcast.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Are you frustrated that no matter how hard you hustle, no matter how much you get done in a day, you still feel like you have little results to show for it? Do you feel like you're doing everything right, but there's still something missing? Well, what if there was an easier way? What if your business could be fun, effortless, and profitable? Phoebe and I have put together a free audio MP3 for you, compiling the 77 business affirmations for creating success from the inside out. And we want to give it to you absolutely free. This is your chance to rewire your brain for bigger results in your life and your business. To get instant access absolutely free, simply visit 77affirmations.com. That's the number 77affirmations.com.